Good afternoon and welcome to another feature of the Numismatic Theater. This afternoon's presentation will be Macerated Money, given by Miss Nancy Green. She was the A&A librarian from 1978 to 1990, and from 2001 to the present time. Nancy is the winner of the Medal of Merit Award and the chairman of the National Coin Week from 1984 to 1989. Please welcome Nancy.
Thank you very much. It's kind of fun to be here this afternoon, and I appreciate you all coming to listen to a talk about something that's a little bit uncommon in numismatics. Several people said, "What's that?" Everybody's interested in money, and I don't just mean numismatists. There is a fascination with having money, and not so much spending it, but just having it, I think. I can remember when I was a little kid, if I had a quarter, that was a lot of money, and I felt really good about things if I had that much money. We as numismatists understand that, but we look at it a little bit differently. The kind of money that I'm talking about today is a kind of paper money. The United States has had a very interesting history when it comes to paper money. We started out with some colonial notes. The Continental Congress issued notes, and they were a disaster. They weren't worth anything, and people became very frightened of paper money. They wanted gold or silver money. So the government never issued paper money, but when the Civil War came along, it was going to require bigger amounts of money to spend for the Army and the war effort. And so in July 17th of 1861, Congress voted that the United States would issue what was called demand notes at that time. Well, when you start issuing paper money, it goes out into circulation. It circulates for a while, and then it gets kind of ratty. And people don't want to lose money just because it's worn out. So they bring it back to the bank and they say, "Trade me for good money." So the bank says yes, and then they go to the government and they say, "Trade us for better money." You got to get rid of all that ratty money. Well, the current figures from the Bureau of Engraving and Printing are that a $1 bill lasts about 22 months. Now, I had always heard 18 months, so they probably improved their paper or ink or whatever, but they claim 22 months for a $1 bill, 2 years for a $5 bill, 10 years for a $3 bill, 4 years for a $20 bill, and a 50 or 100 should last 9 years. Okay. So the federal government was getting back the ratty money that they had issued. Well, they started at first burning it. And the problem was their incinerator didn't have filters on it, and the money would float up the chimney, and people would pick it up off the street and spend it again. So in June of 1874, Congress made it legal for the federal government to macerate money. Macerate is from a Latin word. It means to soften. The word is macero or maceratum. And what they did was they mixed the paper with soda, ash, and lime water, and churned it up and let it sit for several days, and gradually the paper broke down. It was no longer green or brown or whatever, it was gray. And they would process this money for several days and then put it into bales weighing about 250 pounds and sell it to the highest bidder. What did the highest bidder do with it? Well, it was very interesting because one of the things that it was used for was book boards. And now I have the biggest urge to go through the library at A&A and take a little piece off of all the cloth that's on the books from that period of time and see if that might be macerated paper under there. Another thing that they did, which was in the Numismatist in 1911, they used it to fill railroad car wheels. And I'm still trying to figure out how, because I thought railroad wheels were solid metal, but that's what it said in the Numismatist. I need further research, is always a good thing. And what was the other thing that they did with it? They made macerated paper figures. Remember I said people are fascinated with money? Companies bought up these bales and formed the money into little figures and little objects and sold them as souvenirs outside the Bureau of Engraving and Printing in Washington. And on these little figures was a label that said, theoretically, how much cash might be in that little figure. And of course, people were fascinated with this. I should mention that these objects are not mine. They belong to the A&A Museum. The reason that I decided on this topic was because when I first came to A&A, this donation had been given just a few months before. Arthur Fitz was the curator at that time, and they were sitting in his office, and I'd never seen anything like these pieces, and I was fascinated by them. So let's see what we've got. Kind of ugly, isn't it? This little picture has an address on the bottom of it. It has a label. It does not have an amount. Part of the label is worn off. The address is 4th Street Northwest in Washington, D.C. Further research requires that we check the directory in Washington, D.C. and see what was on 4th Street. If there's not a number, it's worn off, but it would be interesting to see if we could find out what company made this. The chemicals that they used to macerate the money turned it gray. So as you can see, this is gray. This is kind of a dirty brown gray. And it's somewhat crudely made. This fancy little shoe says that it was made from $5,000 worth of U.S. paper money. Now, they must have used big bills, because that's not a very big shoe. Some of these shoes, we don't have one here, but some of these shoes had a little cat that sat inside the shoe, so then you had Puss in Boots.
Can you show us where it says that?
On the bottom? Yes. Okay. Now, here is another shoe. This might be a man's shoe. It's a little, not quite so fancy. This one has a label on it, on the toe. And interestingly enough, they have taken off where it said what it was worth and handwritten with an ink pen $25,000 instead of $5,000. So they were trying to make it maybe worth a little more and therefore a little more desirable. This little hat has a red, white, and blue ribbon on it. I suspect that this was something that was given out at a political convention or, to back a candidate rather than just as a souvenir because of the patriotic ribbon, but I don't know, and there's no label on it to indicate. Here's another hat. This one has a pink ribbon on it. And this one has a label that says it's made of U.S. national greenbacks. Now, whether those are really greenbacks or just the colloquialism for greenbacks, we don't know. The label is here on the other side. This little dog, I think, looks like a Staffordshire China dog. He has a black painted nose and eyes and a yellow ribbon. This also has a label that says made of national greenbacks. Here we have a greyhound with a blue ribbon. This ribbon looks a little newer than some of the other ribbons. May have been added, and he's got black painted eyes. Those are miscellaneous figurines, but also very popular were patriotic figures. Here we have a national capitol building, maybe slightly the worse for wear, but recognizable as the Capitol. This one is only worth $1,000, or only has $1,000 in it, I should say. Here we have the Washington Monument. You can see these are sort of crude. No great artistry involved. This eagle has a red, white, and blue ribbon wrapped around him. And he also has a black bead for his eye, which is attached with a pin. A black bead for his eye. Yeah. Here we have a bust of Lincoln. It has a label, but the label, all the words have worn off the label, so we don't know how much they thought that contained. Now, these pieces are pretty rough and pretty crude. Oh, I should show you these as well. Here is a profile of Washington. Only looks like Washington if you get just the right angle. And here we have one of Lincoln. Now these next, I have 3 medallions, and I think these must have been made in a mold. The others almost look like they might have been a free-form, just sculpturing out of the wet. But if you'll notice, this one is quite elaborate. It has a flag flying over the Capitol, drapery around it. And the reverse has a leaf pressed into it, just like colonial paper money. And you can see the veins in the leaf, which make it interesting. Okay. Here we have a portrait of Washington, again, pretty sharp, pretty clear. And on the reverse, rather than having a label, we actually have the letters in the macerated paper. And I guess this one is the most interesting to me. It's identical to the last one, except the pieces of paper, there's some pieces that are bigger in the front. Right away you say, what might that have been once upon a time? What note was that? Well, what note might it have been? These pieces are all from about the turn of the century to the 30s. There were pieces made earlier than that in the 1800s, late 1800s, but none of the pieces that I've shown you this morning are that early. So, what kind of paper money was being produced at that time? Let's look at some slides and see what might have been ground up to make this paper money. Pardon? These would have all been large-size notes. So here we have a large-size silver certificate, second issue. Pretty thing, isn't it? And here's our green back. Color's a little off, but it's a green back. So this very well could have been one of those notes. The education note, issued in $1, $2, and $5 denominations. Too bad to think about that being mushed up into one of these figurines, isn't it? The reverse, again green. Here's an 1899 silver certificate. This is a fourth issue. And here's our reverse. A 1923 silver certificate. And the reverse. The only saving grace of this is that the notes were probably in such bad condition that no collector would have wanted them anyway, except maybe the education note. Here we have national currency. National banknote. National Bank of Texas, but what state? Okay. I think there's a Paris in every state in the Union. And here's the reverse. This is the discovery of the Mississippi River by De Soto. Betcha it didn't look like that, huh? Another national banknote. Notice this has an M on it. For a while, in order to facilitate sorting these notes, they added a letter for the area of the country. M was for middle. W was for Western, P was for Pacific, including Alaska and Hawaii, N for New England, S for South. Interestingly enough, I tried to find out which states constituted each of those areas, and the two experts I asked said that they had never seen a designation, so. And here's the reverse. This is second charter national currency. And a later reverse. Third charter and a reverse. This is the landing of the Pilgrims. I like this one. the only depiction of a four-legged animal. Now somebody's going to say, no, I know someplace there's something else, except there were horses on the obverse. This is a legal tender or United States note. Dated 1901 with Lewis and Clark. And the reverse with Enlightenment as the central figure. Here's a United States note from 1923. This is a note I hope was never ground up, although the ones that still exist are in pretty wretched condition. This is a gold banknote. There were 10 banks that were authorized to issue these notes. 9 of them were in California and 1 was in Boston. And they were backed by gold coin. And there's the lovely reverse. This is a Federal Reserve banknote, which actually is a national banknote, not a Federal Reserve note. Paper money in the United States has been very confusing. And here's the reverse. Columbus discovering America and the Pilgrims landing again. And this is a Federal Reserve note, 1914. This is a Federal Reserve note backed by the Federal Reserve, not the national banks. And here we have an inspiring reverse, progress of the nation, farming and industry. This is a $10 gold certificate. I'm sorry. Yes, a gold certificate. This one is from 1907. This is the large size. The $100,000 bill that we have on the floor in the exhibit area is a small size, but it is also a gold certificate. The larger denominations of these were issued so that banks could transfer funds easily. And here we have the reverse. Treasury or coin note. This is General Philip Sheridan. Reverse of 1890. And here is the reverse of 1891. So any one of these notes could have been one that was macerated to make these little figures. Paper money was macerated by the Treasury from 1876 to 1943. It was sold to the highest bidder until June 30th of 1929. After that, they took it to the dump and buried it. So go to the Washington dump and see what you can find. In 1938, they began burning the macerated paper. But of course, when the pollution concerns came along in the 70s, they had to discontinue that. Paper money was always destroyed by the Treasury in Washington until 1953, when the Federal Reserve banks were given that responsibility. Today they still have to do something with this stuff. So we also have some modern pieces, and these are not macerated, but they are shredded. Actually, this first one is a bar, a club. I don't know, but it is glued, sort of glued together, so I don't know. It may have been macerated, but it's still green. So I can't tell you exactly, but it is from the Federal Reserve. This one is from the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. And this is a solid brick. I don't know, I suppose if you took the cellophane off it would come apart, but it's really quite heavy and solid. And I think, I was counting, I think we've almost got a complete set from, not quite, from the Federal Reserve. This is from the Federal Reserve in Philadelphia. Shredded paper. This one is from the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston. It has a rather elaborate note on it saying that disabled people bag this. This one is from the Charlotte branch of the Federal Reserve Bank in Richmond. And this one, the paper really is not just shredded, it's torn into little bits. This little bitty one is from the Richmond Federal Reserve Bank itself. We have one that's just U.S. paper money. And we have a little bottle, perfume des Monet. And we have a nifty pen from First Union Bank filled with shredded money. Some other recent uses for shredded paper money have been bales for archery practice, packing material for glass objects, although there was an objection to somebody about getting something packed in old U.S. paper money. It wasn't dignified. So they decided that they might instead buy it and use it for bedding for animals. I'm not sure which is more dignified or less dignified. I read about someone who manufactured fireplace logs from shredded paper, mixed it with wax. And the most interesting use of all that I found was as a lubricant in oil well drills. When you put the well down and you come to rock that creates friction, you need something to lubricate it. You use oil, and they used shredded paper money. We were all fascinated with paper money. The urge to do something with this waste paper, because it was money and not just garbage waste paper, I think is an interesting aspect of our history. I want to thank Beth Deischer, Ken Brissett, Jane Colvard, and Bertram Cohen for helping me with my research. I really didn't know very much about this when I started out, but it's been a lot of fun finding out. Thank you.
Any questions?
Yes, are there questions? Yes.
What did they use for a binder after the Bureau released the macerated pulp to the manufacturer? What did they use as to keep it?
To keep it together?
And breaking?
I don't know. That was never mentioned. They made these bales. Do you know?
I don't think anything was used.
No.
It's just water, just
I got the,
Basically like paper mache.
yeah, yeah, I got the impression that it just stuck to itself without a problem. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Were there any manufacturers that were famous for making the figurines, or any themes that were also made in like a porcelain that could be gotten in currency?
I don't know of anything that was made of macerated paper and china or porcelain, but there was a national currency company that did manufacture this stuff, and as I say, when you do research, you always find out something else you need to do research on. I would like to investigate these addresses, and I would like to look up the history of that company and see if I could find out where in Washington they were and try to make some kind of a connection with that. Yes?
How much of this survives today?
Not a lot. I think Bert told me he had about 100 or 150 different things, and something that I did not exhibit, but you can come up and look. He sent me colored photocopies of postcards, which was another thing that they made out of macerated paper, and they're quite expensive. Someone saw one at a show not too long ago, and it was $150 for the postcard. I know the postcards are quite rare. Yeah, Winborn.
What's the density of them? Is it just light paper, very light paper?
It's very light. Yes, it is very light. I've got gloves up here. If you're welcome to come and look. If you pick it up, please use a glove. But yeah, it is very light. The only exception is this brick, which is like a brick. It's just they really compressed it to make that one. Yes.
Follow up on the postcard. Does it state on the postcard that it's made with macerated currency, or do you just have to get lucky and figure it out?
Some of them do. Yes, yes. And if you look at his pictures, if you know what you're looking at, you know what it is. It's pretty obvious. Some of them have pretty big pieces of the money left in them, and that's what got, when I saw the pictures, it's like, oh gee, what did they chop up to go in here? What do they, put in the soup to make these figures? And yes, Glenn.
You said at the beginning of your talk that this paper was used in railroad wheels.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about that through your whole talk, and then when you got to the point about oil drills, use it to lubricate when they had hard rock, I got to thinking that in the railroad wheel application, it would probably be in the journal box, mixed with oil and used as waste to lubricate the axle.
That could be.
It was not actually part of the steel wheel itself,
Yeah.
more of a lubricant in the old 19th century journal box lubricating
Yeah.
waste product that they used. That
Yeah.
would be the only thing I can think that
Yeah.
they would be used for.
I bet you're right. That makes sense. Mm-hmm.
And after that,
Yeah.
they progressed further and more sophisticated lubricating pads. So
Right.
So on.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
It
That's
was used during the Civil War.
the money.
It wasn't until 1874 they were authorized to dispose of it.
Yeah, and generally it was burned before that. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
time frame is too early.
Yeah.
But probably later on.
Later on. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you.